and welcome to the third series that I've put together to help all of you through your writing journey, understanding who you are and why you should be writing. So I've got a cat's hair on the screen, thanks. So I wanted to put this together because a lot of the books that I write, either myself or about other people, or books that my clients write, they tend to have a theme of identity about who we are. There's always cultural cohesion and cultural, well, I don't like the word cultural diversity, and I'll tell you why in a second. But they're always about the looking at who we are, who we think we are, who we want to be. And we've seen so many coaches talking about these subjects, but they're all coming from a pretty monocultural point of view. The reason I'm different, I'm very different, is one, I don't take myself far too seriously, but I've lived and worked in 44 countries. I don't see the world through the same lens that people who've only lived in one country do, or just two countries. And I've not just looked at the countries that are European or Western. I have gone to some of the most remote countries, small little diversity archipelagos around the world by sailboat, where you can only get to these places by sailboat. So that's my difference. People who want to tell their truth, their view of the world, how we can look at building bridges between communities, between the different ethnicities, etc., nationalities, and really look at where we come from. And I don't just, and yes, we're going to get a bit woo, a bit more woo. But this one, we've divided it into sections. So this one is all about roots and reckonings. You know me, I love a bit of alliteration. And so we're going to be looking today about exploring what our identity is, our faith, how that impacts us, as well as the nationalism, you know, those flag waving folks that might trigger the heck out of us. Because people like their flags, don't they? Some of them I'd like to burn, but there we go. And so I come at it from a nomadic way of life, freedom to travel, somebody who has, just in my one family, my two children and I, we have 4 different ethnicities within our family, 4 different nationalities, and no, 3 ethnicities, 4 nationalities. And yeah, we bridge a lot of cultures. So that's who I am, and that's why I'm bringing this to you, and why I am slightly different to lots of other people. Okay, I can't flick it with that. I'm not on PowerPoint. So before we progress, I wanted us to actually have a look at the frame of what we're going to be talking about. It's like, what labels have you applied to yourself? Because we really need to start deconstructing the labels before we can actually begin to understand who we are. And we have to look at why we have these labels. When we look at it from a scientific point of view, to categorize, let's use insects, or creepy crawlies, that kind of thing. I'm not a fan of them, to be honest, unless they're butterflies and dragonflies. I like those. Ladybugs I like. I've showered with scorpions in rainforests, but you know, we're just going to look at that. And when we look at why the classifications are there, we understand why labels have become so important, because people are looking for identity. They're looking for a sense of belonging, because for some reason we don't feel that we belong unless we have a label. We don't feel that we belong, whether it's a label on our clothing, a medical label, whether it's a fashion label. And when I say a fashion label, it's like, oh, you're a nomad, or you're a digital nomad, or you location free, or you've got ADHD, or you're ADD, or you're neurospicy, or neurodiverse, or autoimmune, or you've got fibromyalgia, or you've got this, or you've got that. And you know what? Let's just stop. Let's just stop for a minute and look at where these labels come from. When you look at science, you'll have like winged beings. We're all looking at angels or birds or butterflies or dragonflies, or we're looking at flies, cockroaches, and you can really tell I love insects, can't you? And you've got mosquitoes, really not a fan of those little bad boys. But again, we needed to be able to track certain things, like where are they? Are they extinct? Where do they live? Where did they come from? What are the different species, but what are the different varieties within those species? And so this is where the labeling of humans then came from. Well, you're from this part of the world, northern hemisphere, the southern hemisphere. You're from the Tropic of Cancer. You're from the Tropic of Capricorn. You're from this part, this time scale, this altitude, this depth of the ocean. And we started looking at so many, well, obviously humans are not from the depths of the ocean. Well, yeah, it depends on which philosophy, evolution you believe in, and whether you believe mermaids are real. But we've got to really start thinking about who we are and who do we think we are and who have we been told we are. Because a lot of the time, these labels that we carry around with us, they're not helpful. They're limiting, they're oppressive, they incite probably some hatred. Maybe they, put us into this box and we can only do that particular thing. So, for example, you could say, well, you're English. Well, I might have been born in England, and I might have a British passport, but my culture, I don't even know where that comes from anymore, other than the 44 countries I've lived and worked in. And a lot of the time, people don't even know the difference between their ethnicity, their nationality, and their culture. And they wouldn't be able to tell you anything about, they think, oh, like, well, I'm British, that's a culture. Well, yeah, it could be, but the Scottish culture is very different to English, it's very different to Welsh, and it's also quite different to Cornish. Now, the Cornish thing, some people go, hey, que pasa? But the Cornish people are very different to the rest of England. And going back a few years, some of them might not think that they're English. They don't like to believe that they're English. Again, history. Has history told us who we are? If you go back far enough, I'm Viking from Norway, and I'm Scottish, I'm Celtic, I'm a bit of everything. We all are. We can't not be. We've moved around the world for centuries. And we have to look at, whether our teachers or our parents have told us who we are. Oh, well, oh, you're a bright young thing, aren't you? Or, you might have had a teacher that says, oh gosh, you're not so quick, are you? And it might be, oh, you're shy. No, I'm just watching you because I'm not quite understanding who you are really. Or you're not quite understanding a concept. So you get labeled as shy or introvert. People love to know, oh, I'm an introvert, but I'm an extrovert. I'm a bit of both. Are any of them actually accurate with who you are at any given moment of the day? And where did these all come from? So for some of the things that we get told by doctors is it's because they're trying to push a certain drug, or that they've only got a limited sphere of knowledge. One of the things I've always said to people is, if you're going to get a diagnosis of something, don't just go to a doctor within your own country. Phone up a doctor in a different country. Find a friend or go online, change your VPN, speak to people in different countries about your symptoms. Because what one nation says you are might be completely different. There are some medical practices that are allowed in Britain that are not allowed in the States, and vice versa. All guns blazing in Sweden. Some places will allow euthanasia, others won't. Some nations, they won't allow women to have more than one C-section. Lots of countries actually prefer a woman to not have a C-section because gentlemen of a very sensitive disposition, you might want to, step out the room for a second. When a woman gives birth naturally, it creates a natural vacuum, which actually releases so many endorphins and the serotonin and all the happy chemicals. And it's like whoosh, it fills our body with it. But when we're actually going and having to have a cesarean, or we're choosing to have an elective cesarean, um, what actually we don't release those hormones. So we're seeing a rise in postpartum depression. But that's actually not shared with a lot of people. But this is why some countries are really against women having C-sections. Are these labels that, if you're given, I remember in Britain, to use this analogy, and you'll understand why I'm talking about C-sections. When Victoria Beckham had chose to have a cesarean, I believe she chose it. I couldn't find any information to the contrary. They were saying, "Oh, she's too posh to push." Well, is she too posh to push, or were they just playing on the fact that her name in the Spice Girls was Posh Spice and they needed some alliteration? Again, look at where these labels have come from, and are they accurate? Were they ever accurate? Is she too posh? She seems quite down to earth. She's well spoken, but does that mean she's posh and above herself? Probably not. We don't know her. I've never sat down and had dinner and a cup of tea with her. And actually, how do these labels that we apply to ourselves, how do they make us feel? Do they make us feel, oh, I actually belong somewhere now? Do you really? Are you just feeling that, you need that to make sense of who you are? A lot of women in their 40s are now being told they've got ADHD, when really, when we look at what ADHD is, it's very similar to burnout. It's very similar to the symptoms of it. Trauma. It's also women in their 40s, very similar to menopause. A lot of women are in the older women are in the menopause, they're burnt out and they've been through trauma. Presenting signs of ADHD, but there are some that do and have felt like that throughout their life. I'm not dismissing it, but how do these labels that have been imposed upon us, or that we have chosen for ourselves, how do they make us feel, and how do they allow us to belong? So that's the framework that we're working from today. And that's the deconstructing of labels. Now, another reason why I wanted to do this series is, in my first book, Friday Bridge, I spoke about what it was like for me not feeling like I belonged in my own family. I married a bloody foreigner. I had foreign children. They were of different ethnicity, like my ex-husband's family from different religious group. I ended up having to choose to be married to my husband or part of my family. And although those words weren't spoken directly, the words that were used, the behaviors that went with it, it was like, choose him or choose us. I chose him. And my family broke down bit by bit by bit. And we've been conditioned to know that if you're not from around here, in a real Norfolk accent, um, you're not from around here, are you? I don't know if any of you have seen the program Little Britain. I'm not saying it's quite that bad. That's more the Las Malvina Islands, also known as Falklands. But again, people that were not local, they're foreign. Things that we don't know, they're foreign. And when I wrote that book, it was like, even the people who were from London weren't really welcome where I grew up. So imagine me marrying this dark, exotic young man, that's going to whisk me off around the world to places unknown. It frightened the life out of my parents, because my parents still live in the same village my dad grew up in, which is still, I think, about 6 miles from where my mum grew up. That's their comfort zone. Our national identity is formed and characterized by comfort zones. It's like, this is our land. We've put the flag in the ground and that's it. When we go to North America, two of the countries, Canada and America, so United States, They are massive on their flag flying. I honestly, when I went to the States, in the United States of America, um, I've lived in Brazil, the States. Brazil has a lot more states, I believe, or getting close to it. No, it doesn't, not even halfway. But again, my frame of what the states are and the states of America, again, it's different because Brazil is in the Americas. But the national identity of Brazil, you would probably think, if you only went to Sao Paulo, that most Brazilians are white, but they're not. They're really European, like the people in Sao Paulo region. 10% of Brazilians are white. The Europeans that went over there. If you go up into the Nordeste region, and that's the African quarter there. That's how the Brazilians, or the Brasileiros, refer to a lot of them. And again, it's like, what is that national identity that they've got given? When you're looking at the foods we eat, how the music that we listen to, like the cultural practices of the carnival. People are there and they've got the brilliant, vibrant feathers of the birds and the plumes, and the music. And like, you go to Argentina, it's a little bit more reserved, a lot more reserved, depending on a lot more reserved. But again, Buenos Aires has got a melting pot of Japan, and there's a lot of huge, strong Jewish, Israeli part of it. If you go up into Bariloche, very different from the south down in down below Patagonia in Punta Arenas, and you just go over the border, you're in Chile, and all of these different things. We've moved around the world so much. So why is our national identity? What does it mean? Are these flags bringing people together? When you look at the flag flying people of Texas, this is a Texan flag. And then you've got the American flag, and you've got the Yankee flag, and you've got all these different flags, but under it, there's a phrase that the Arabs use. It's me and my brother. It's me against my brother. Me and my brother against my cousin. Me and my cousins against the neighbors, etc. So, and again, it's like, if it's between siblings, you're going to fight like cat and dog, probably. And again, it's looking at how we bring ourselves together, but then we destroy ourselves from the inside as well. And again, that this is where this identity of crisis comes in, because I am American, but I might not agree with the war. I might not agree with national service. I am British. My passport is British. I'm also Scottish. I'm also Welsh. I'm also English. But when I think of food from home, I either think of Arabic food or Latin American food. It's like, because that's home for me. That feels familiar. That's where I felt the most love and the most inclusivity. And again, these are the things that we're looking at. If we have grown up in if we're looking at Britain, and you've got a huge Pakistani community here, and with that, people have learned to, like in Manchester, we've got a place called the Curry Mile. You want a good curry, you go to Britain, you go to Manchester. When I won an award recently, I live in Cardiff in Wales, and to celebrate, my son and I were like, oh, let's have fish and chips up, because I've been living out of Britain. I hadn't had fish and chips for a long time. We went to a Pakistani-owned fish and chip shop in Wales. So we had an English meal in Wales made in a Pakistani shop, and it absolutely made me so happy, because of like, this is the new identity of Britain. We've got so many ethnicities, and you walk along the street and it's like, oh my God, you hear all these beautiful languages and smell all these incredible aromas, and you see these beautiful clothing. But some people, you're not from around here, are you? We can't have you foreigners coming over here, stealing our women, stealing our jobs, and imposing your religions on us and all your ideas and your laws and blah, blah. You've got that side, the people who resist the evolution. They resist what's been happening for centuries. People have been sailing around the world. We've had the spice routes. We've had, when you look at macaroni, this is an Arabic word. People think it's Italian, but it's not. Macaroni means with my force. Ma is with. Macron, force, and the I on the end, it's the E sound, is my, with my force. Macaroni is Arabic. It's not Italian. Not a lot of people know that. Lots of trivia prizes for you today. But again, it's about understanding what it is that's influencing our ideas. When you look at the Southern Italians, you're going to see dark hair, dark eyes. And any of you who've seen True Romance and saw, I think it was Al Pacino, said, you know, why do you think the people in Southern Italy are as dark as that? He goes, because the Arabs came over and put your mother. If you haven't seen that film, great film. It's got Juliet something in, and it's also got Christian Slater. Great film. You can tell how old I am. But again, it's like, how do other people see you in your nation? You know, how are people exploiting your nation? We only have to look to some of the things that are going on in the African continent, where it's rich in minerals and oils, and in Oman, there's so much oil there, and you know, the minerals and the gas pipelines off the state Patagonia, and then you've got the ones off the top of the Middle East where Palestine it's under genocide at the moment, you know. And again, we've got to look at all of these things, because I know some really beautiful Israeli people. I also know that they're not Zionists. I also know that, you know, they've embraced Islam, but you've got an Islamic Israeli who's not Zionist. That's a bit of a head mess up for some people. They're against what's going on with Palestine. So again, what is going on inside your country, or what affiliations of your government given you that shows other people who you are? Most people, when I'm traveling, they, you know, to share an insight, when I was in Brazil, I really wanted a cup of tea. The little beach coffee shop that I went to, they didn't have tea bags. I was completely shocked. I'd only been in Brazil a couple of days, and I really wanted a cup of tea, and I couldn't find anyone. Very English of me to want a cup of tea in the afternoon, is it not? And the chap said, he goes, oh, look in your bag, you're English, you'll find a cup of tea, you'll find a tea bag. I said, no, wait, I've got tea bags with me. An hour later, I'm looking at doing some journaling. What do I find in my bag? Bloody tea bag. I started laughing, and then I was like, oh my God, that's so English of me. But if I hear English people talking when I'm traveling, I switch languages. I really don't want to talk to them, because they'll only want to talk to me in English, and I want to talk the language of the country that I'm in. I want to learn the language. How are you speaking the language? Can people identify which part of the country you're from, or from the nation that you're from? Is this a tribal thing that's come through? You know, is it the fact that when I speak Arabic, people go, oh my God, where are you from? Because they can hear the Egyptian accent, they hear Moroccan words, they'll hear like Gulf Arabic words, they'll hear the Lebanese, and they're like, there's some Fusha in there, there's also modern standard. Fusha is the language of the Quran. And they're like, where are you from? I'm like, England. Now they're really confused. One chap in Amsterdam, we're in a coffee shop. He was talking with his friends. I understood him. I giggled in all the right places, and he couldn't understand it. And we finally got chatting, and we were back and forth in Arabic. He goes, oh my God, it's like you see into my soul. I went, I do. An hour later, we filled the coffee shop with all of his friends and family, and I now have a family there if ever I want to go. Again, what do people see when they look at you, and what do they think they know about you? No one would ever anticipate that I speak Arabic. When I meet people and speak Spanish with them, or Italian, or even Portuguese, Brazilian Portuguese, they're like, oh, wow. Most English people don't learn a different language. Most Americans don't learn another language. And it was only until Americans needed a passport to go into Canada that the number of Americans that had a passport went up from 5% to 45%. But they only go into Canada. They haven't traveled to outside into Europe or Africa or Asia. And out of those 5%, only 2% of those were not military. So again, it's like looking at who you are in the world and how other people see you. It's really, really important. I could go on. You can probably tell I'm as passionate about this as I am about writing and reading. Um, and as I've just mentioned about the different countries, we've got one nation here in Britain, because I'm actually in Britain at the moment. When we get a bit further on in this series, I won't be in Britain, and you'll see me country hopping. But people think that things such as we have British law. No, we don't. We don't have the British national dish. We have the English roast beef, which has become curry. We have the Scottish neeps and tatties and haggis. Your Cornish is the Cornish pasty, and Welsh is your Welsh cakes. You know, they're pretty much standard. And it wasn't until I moved to Wales that I realised that the Welsh don't eat lamb all the time. They only eat it when it's fresh. If you want lamb, well, then you have to go to a supermarket, and who wants to have meat from a supermarket? I know I don't. Ooh, how long's it been there? Why is it still red? Why does it look fresh when it's been in plastic for a week at least? That's got some stuff in it you really don't want. That's preserving things you don't want. Again, it's like looking and people go, oh, but this country, well, Britain's not a country. Britain is a nation. And at the moment, what we're seeing is with the politics, immigration, and one of the things that since I've been back in Britain, people have moaned about the levels and the increase in immigration. I know that I've spoken to a lot of people in the States about the levels of immigration that's happening there. But here in Britain, what they've been talking about is all these immigrants that are coming to this country. And then they start citing all the people who come across the channel from France in a little boat. 5 years, we had 88,000 immigrants come across the channel. 5 years. In 1 year, we had over 167,000 Ukrainians come over in 1 year. The 88,000 people that came over in 5 years were not given a place to stay. They were not given education and meals and placed in a school. People did not open up their homes to them. They had to make their own shelters. Not the case with the Ukrainians. What was the difference? They were white and they were Christian. They're also blonde-haired, most of them. But they didn't like coming here because we're so ethnically diverse. What is British culture? When you've got Scottish, you've got English, you've got Welsh, you've got the Pakistanis who have helped save Britain and build Britain's textile and IT, and you know, and you've got all the. There's just so much richness when we embrace so many other people as you are going to come. And again, we've got different religions here. We've always had different religions in all these different countries because, like I said, the spice routes, we've had like the, you know, people are sending textiles in for thousands from years. Most people will eat a Jaffa orange. Most people know of a Jaffa cake. Jaffa is Jafar, which comes from Palestine. The Jaffa orange comes from Palestine. But if you're really against the Palestinian, why are you eating Jaffa cakes? Again, it's about understanding all of these things. You know, the different ethnicities, you know, like I said, in my own family, we have my boys are Egyptian, Palestinian, and they're English. They're also Scottish. So that's 4 nationalities. So they've got the Arab and the English, the Palestinian and the Egyptian ethnicities, and they've also got the British. Again, British is not an ethnicity; it's a nationality. How are we breaking it all down? And then when we're looking in our families, have we got somebody who is from a higher social class to a lower social class, the working class to the middle class? The upper class is the social classes. When we look at India and you've got the caste system, how are they being broken down when people travel to different parts of the world? They've left India where the caste system is still quite strong. They've gone to America where it's not a thing. And then you've got, you know, you come to Britain, we don't accept the caste system. So again, like the States, it's like, well, we don't do that here. So how are the different Indians that are working within different corporations, how are they handling that? You know, are the companies that they're working in, that's a work culture that they're probably not used to. You know, if you've come from India and you are so used to a caste system, and somebody who you believe is a lower caste to you is actually your senior 3 times above, how's that going to make you feel? And are all these labels and the heritages that we bring to our new homeland, or that we're embracing into our homeland, our motherland, how are we dealing with it? You know, these are really, really important questions that we need to be looking at ourselves, and what stories we're making up around it. You know, we make meaning to a lot of things, and we create stories we have no idea of. You know, and to give you an example, when you're looking at having a conversation with someone, you probably play it out in your head. Okay, well, I could say this, and then probably say that, and then I'll say that. No, why would you do that? Stop wasting your mental energy. Stop wasting your time. We're all guilty of it, me included. Well, you know, I don't want to say that to them because they might say that, they might be offended. Be prepared to be offended. And if you get triggered, embrace it, because now you've just been given a gift. You've been given gold. I've just been triggered. Oh my goodness, what does that mean? What is that saying about me? How can I embrace that? Okay, do I need to let it go? All of these different things. And my youngest son and I were going, as I mentioned a few moments ago, as we go further through this series, I'll be coming to you from different countries. We call it Eastern Europe. Where does that come from? It might be geographically on the cardinal points of the compass. Positionality, it is Eastern Europe. But one of the reasons why it became Eastern Europe is because they were from Slavic, they were from the gypsy cultures, their own mini cultures, and all that, you know, they're not quite as prestigious as the British. We didn't really kind of want them. And they, you know, they weren't as strict as the Germans, and they weren't as romantic and sexy as the French, you know. So we othered them. And again, it's like how we're othering. How do we other other people? Eastern Europe, saying, oh, you're from Eastern Europe. Not, you're from Europe. They are Europeans. But we have to put the Eastern bit in, because that divides them from the prestigious side of Europe. Again, how are we othering those that don't belong? Oh, you're from London. We know your kind, you urban city folk. Again, how are things that we're saying in jest, how are they really translating? And as I said at the very beginning of this, having lived in lots of different countries, I've had to relearn the British history and the British culture, break it all down, because every new country I go to, I'm like, oh my God, we actually did that. I knew something else. I was taught this at school. This is what we were led to believe in Britain about this country, or about this ethnicity, or about this nation, or about the music, or about the religion, because it suited a narrative of an individual or an anthropologist that went to that country with their own prejudice and with their own bias, and just a small group of people that they maybe researched from. And that was the thing, they took a sample. They didn't see the whole. And this is one of the reasons why it's like, when you're looking at things on an anthropological level, as I've been doing, working towards my PhD, if we're only taking a sample, that's at that period in time. Are you taking it from the rural, from the suburban to the city? Are you taking sections from that, and are you taking them from the research from different generations? People that are new there, people that have always lived there, second, third, fourth level generational immigrants. Are they all giving the same situation? Excuse me. I remember when I was in London, I was at St Pancras, and there was a gentleman there who was looking after the baggage. And you can put your bags in lockers, and there was a young lady there of Indian descent. Her behavior was so appalling and so nasty that I couldn't just stand there and keep quiet. I mean, excuse me, you're either a second or a third generation immigrant in this country, and yet here you are speaking to this young man the way in which a lot of British people spoke to your grandparents or your parents. How would you feel if someone was speaking to your parents or your grandparents the way you're speaking to him? She was so upset and offended that I had called her on her bullshit, on her racism, and on her prejudice. And she was so discombobulated that I'd even dared to question her. I mean, I was traveling at the moment. I was passing through. I had been, you know, traveling for quite some time at that point. I was only making a pit stop back here in Britain, and there she was in all that corporate gear because, you know, the corporates. Again, I'm othering. And it's those things that we do, like, oh, like, you know, well, she's traveling, so she can't be very educated. She can't, you know, she hasn't got anywhere to live. She's homeless by choice. And people look down on you when you're traveling, or if you're not in the corporate gear, or you're not in the, you know, the A-line skirt and the blazer, and you haven't got the things just so. And where does that come from? What label, the labels we started with, that we've taken on, that we've been given, how are we giving those to other people? You know, where do they come from? Like from our family, the generational beliefs, their values, their limitations. Where's the moral compass? And do we really want to be projecting things on other people that we would not accept for ourselves? I remember when I had my first business, if I'd have turned up at one of my legal clients the way I'd turn up for one of my creative clients, I wouldn't have been professional. But if I'd have turned up at my creative clients, having just been to a legal client, they'd have been thinking I was in court. I probably was with my legal client. But again, the perceptions. You know, if a guy's got long hair and a long beard, you know, oh, he's a bit unkempt. He's a bit, oh, it's not very well put together. You never know who you're talking to, ever, and what you're projecting. And when you're projecting onto others and judging others, it says more about you than it says about them. And you heard me mention at the top of this that I don't really like the word diversity. Again, word nerd head on. Diversity, divide, divorce, division. It's all about separation. Whereas when we look at cohesion and community and collaboration and communication, it's about bringing together, cooperating. You know, and a lot of this division, Great British Empire, divide and conquer, we divide people. It's a war strategy. When we divide people, when we highlight the differences, the labels that we had at the very beginning of this, when we divide them, we can make smaller groups feel weaker. We can have more control over them. Remember, the only things that we want to control are the things we're afraid of. We're afraid of the power. Imagine the things that you're afraid of. If you actually looked at the power that's behind it and embraced that, what could you achieve? A lot of us have been brainwashed by the media, and that's not good. They've tried to take our agency away. The media operate, they call it programming. The TV was a brainwashing tool because of the vibrations and the light frequencies. You only have to go and look at the patent agreements to actually see that it was actually originally painted as a brainwashing tool. And then you've got the programming, they run one by one. Look at how they're put together. Look at what you're watching. Switch off the TV, switch off mainstream media, says a woman who actually does speak on mainstream media, to try and break it up a bit. Again, what are you being brainwashed? And is your brain being washed of the toxicity, or are you embracing cognitive dissonance? And, you know, how are you allowing your brain to be infiltrated and being told, you know, well, we have shorter attention spans? No, we don't. We don't have shorter attention spans. They just want us to have more drugs, or they want us to believe that. And remember, the social media platforms are the ones that propagated that narrative, you know, especially Twitter. They want you to write in shorter sentences. They only want you to read that because they want you to read social media or watch videos on social media rather than read a book. I'm telling you, you don't have the capacity to understand these complexities, but you absolutely do. We all do. I am coming to the end. I do want to read you. I've got a book here. But I want you to think about a few things. Has anyone ever told you about getting ideas above your station? Something that I was told when I was growing up, and who do you believe we are? Money doesn't grow on trees. All of these different things that are limiting you. And how are they forming your identity? And, how does your faith tell you how to be when it comes to receiving money, or for, having your place in the world? If you're a woman, is your role to be the caregiver? That's if you're in a patrilineal kinship system. But if you're in a matrilineal kinship system, like they are out in different archipelagos in the world, it's the men who stay at home. It's the women that go to work. We're looking at hunter-gatherers, and men go out hunting, and the women would toil the soil. In the matrilineal communities, it would be the woman who would go out hunting, because she's quieter, she's left it, it's got different ways. Again, it depends on the animals you're hunting. What is it that you're doing, and which is your kinship system? And again, using the words. When you say to someone, "How are you?" or someone asks you, "How are you?" You're not too bad. Does that mean you're not good? Because if you're not too bad, that must mean you're bad, which is the opposite to good. Or would you say, "Oh, I'm great, thank you"? Or if you ask somebody how they are, and they actually say to you, "Actually, I'm having a really shit day today," or "I'm feeling really emotional, I'm really frightened," you didn't really want to know how they were. You were just making pleasantries. Again, are you opening up? If you're asking a question, are you prepared for the answer? If people ask me my opinion, they're going to get it. So if you don't want to be told what I think, or you don't want my opinion, or you don't want honest feedback, don't ask me for it, because as the saying goes, I'm not a bakery. I don't sugarcoat things. Again, you've got to look at the stories that you're telling yourself, this narrative that you've embraced, these identity things, these labels, the nationalism. You're English, therefore you have tea and scones at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Therefore, you should also have a Sunday fry-up or a roast beef for lunch. Again, if you're an American, you need to be eating burger and chips. If you're an Italian, you've got to be eating pasta all the time. Again, look at all of these things that, just because you're Italian doesn't mean to say that you can't be a great Mexican chef. Just because you're Korean doesn't mean to say that you can't be a great Italian chef. If you're Korean, you've got North Korea, South Korea. What does that do to you? If you're from Germany, East, West from years ago, what does that do? There's a great book I'm reading at the moment, not the one I'm also reading at the moment, called Born to Witness by Hans J. Masakai. He was a black guy. His father was from Liberia. His mother was German. He grew up in Nazi Germany as a black boy. Imagine that. Again, incredible book, incredible book. But again, it's this whole thing about learning who you are, the journey he went through, the evolution, the understanding. And the book that I'm reading at the moment is Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey. All right. I just love his southern drawl. Again, the things you're telling yourself, is it becoming, are you doing it to grow, or are you doing it to beat yourself up? What is the story you're saying? Change your story, change your life. How can you reclaim who you are on your terms? Let go of the things that do not belong to you. I call it return to sender. If somebody sends you or gives you something that you don't want, you say, no, thank you. Same with labels, same with your nationality, same with your culture. If it does not fit with who you are, return it. It's not yours. It doesn't belong to you. Remember who you are, not just in this lifetime, but other lifetimes. We are not, again, you might not believe that we have past lives. That's up to you. Where does your soul go when you die? Who knows? Do any of us know? But at this point, I want to read you this tiny little bit. There's only 10 lines. And Matthew McConaughey said on page 103 of Green Lights, "We are not here to tolerate our differences. We are here to accept them. We are not here to celebrate our sameness. We are here to salute our distinctions. We are not born into equal circumstances or with equal abilities, but we should have equal opportunity. As individuals, we unite in our values, celebrate that." And that's what this is all about. Celebrating our uniqueness and our differences. Again, diversity, difference, they are differences. How are we celebrating them? How are we bringing them all together so we can become this rich world of understanding. Again, like I said, are your beliefs yours? Are they your parents, your grandparents? Do they belong to your government? Do they belong to the mass media? Do they belong to the toxic, trashy tabloids? And one of the things that I really want you to understand is the actions and things that you say. Have you considered the kind of person they make you? Who are you? Who are you being? Not what do you want to be, or what job do you want to have, or what title do you want to have? What kind of person do you want to be? Emphasis on the kind of person. Do your actions and the things you do, are you taking advantage of someone? Are you using someone to get your own way? Are you manipulating something with your words? As Alfred Lord Tennyson once said, lawyers are the manipulators of words because they need to win the debate to win the case. They might not believe them. They might not believe the words they say, but they will manipulate words to get what they want. And are we being overly generous with compliments and kindness because we know we want something that we can't yet have? Are we social climbers? Are we people that are name dropping? Are we people that, could never imagine that we could achieve something because of something somebody else said about us? If we've gone all inclusive on holiday or exclusive, have we actually been to the country? Have we actually seen the people in there? We might have been to the country, but have we lived it? Have we eaten with the locals? Have we learnt the language? If you've gone all inclusive or exclusive, my bet is you've never been to the country. You've just been to a resort or a private beach. And if you're not including, by default, you're excluding. If you're not including people, you're excluding them. I want you to really consider that. And here we are at the end. So remember, the more we learn about others, the more we learn about ourselves. And like I said, one of the things I've learned from traveling all around the world is that when we judge others, which is what prejudging. It's a prejudice. It's not ours. It's borrowed. Excuse me. I'm so excited on this subject. I need 1 second. I really have to get soda stream. But again, the fears we have of other people, unless we've experienced them for ourselves, unless we've been to that country, unless we've embraced that culture, doesn't mean we have to choose it for ourselves. We just embrace it. If we're not accepting somebody else's lifestyle and belief systems, it means there's something in about ourselves that we're not accepting. So choose wisely, choose joy, and choose you. And that's it for today. Thank you so much for joining. Those of you who've been watching on the replay, remember that you can join me for any of these series. Oh, hang on, let me just get out of this. If you would like to talk to me about your narrative, you can. I do have these narrative coaching. Whoops, there we go. My team have been working on it in the background. It was not branded properly, and I was like, do book in for a 45-minute narrative coaching inquiry where we can actually look at who you are, what it is that you're saying to yourself, and how that might be playing out in your success. If you want to, because author coaching and narrative coaching, they're very much the same space. I use a lot of narrative coaching with my authors. If you are looking breaking free from a limitation, narrative coaching might be the thing. I'm not quite sure why that's not loading, but this will actually be included in the notes. And if you want to learn a bit more about me, then you can always go to my website, dawnbates.com. Tells you a lot more about what I'm up to. There's books on there. You can actually have a look, but the books by myself, we'll just go to that. There's quite a few. Yeah, there's quite a few. There are more coming, obviously. And these are just some of my clients' books. So please do have a look at those. And if there's anything that I can do to support you, then I would absolutely love to. And remember, who you choose to be, emphasis on the be rather than the do or the have. Remember, choose wisely, choose joy, and choose you. Until next week, ciao for now.